Okay, so you want to improve your freelance business, you're getting started and you're just not quite sure what to do. Well, today I've got some tips for you that will help you improve your freelance business and help grow your income and also keep you a little bit more sane while you're running it. So let's get to it. Now, the first one is the boring stuff, legalities. You want to make sure, talk to your accountant. Depending on what country you're in, make sure you find out the information about what's required for you to run a business legally. You need to make sure you've got your tax under control, you got all your business registrations set up so that you can just start doing business in the first place. The second tip is to push big ticket items. One of the things I did when I started my business was I started selling websites primarily because I could get a good $1,000 for a website. This meant that when I was actually starting full time, all I needed was one sale a week in a website and I was averaging $1,000 a week straight away. If you start with something like $50, you've got to reach more people, more customers, and you've got to be better at expanding your network. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have these things, but definitely lead with the big items that are going to make you the most money first so you can try and make those connections and get some money in the bank a lot quicker when you're starting out. And also, if you find that you are wasting time with little jobs, why not focus on the big jobs and just drop the little ones off after time? That way, you're only getting the jobs that pay really well and you just don't need to reach as many people to keep the money coming in. The second is to work in package prices, not hourly rates. Now, the reason you want to do that is because even though if you're charging $100 or $150 an hour, is you start to punish yourself for being efficient. Imagine you charge $100 for a particular design, you get that $100 every time. If I'm charging $100 per hour for that design, even if it takes me an hour, I'm still better off charging the package price. The reason is because as I do more and more of that work, I'm going to get faster and more efficient. And if I'm charging by the hour, and eventually it comes down to taking me half an hour to do the job, I'm now only charging $50. Whereas if I had the package price, as I get quicker, more efficient, I'm still getting $100. And this also works if you start to find other people you can actually outsource to. If you're sort of inclined that way, is that you can actually pay them possibly $30 or $40 to do the job if that's what they charge, and still just go in there, make a little adjustments, and then you still get your $100 for that job. So think about package prices instead of hourly rates is definitely one thing I recommend. Now, another tip, just circling back a little, is understand your taxes. Go to your accountant and get a basic understanding of what your taxes are like and how they work, because the last thing you want is have to pay taxes and not have the money there. So come up with a plan around keeping money aside for your taxes so that way you're not getting caught off guard. Speak to your accountant, work on a strategy, and try to get a bit of an idea of what you should be doing to make sure that you've got money set aside for that when the tax bill rolls in. Now, another tip which comes back to the package pricing is find ways to work quicker. Pretty obvious, right? The thing is, a lot of people think this, but they just try to actually physically work faster. The truth is, if you can systemize certain processes and understand what it is you do in a way where you can actually get things like templating done up or come up with a formula, think of ways where you can cover more ground more quickly by being smart about the process you use to actually make that thing. Now, one thing that you can even do is I actually have someone who occasionally cuts out images for me. When I get a big job that requires a lot of cutouts, I can work quicker by outsourcing that to him, bring it back in, and it costs me less to get him to do it than it does for me to do it. But also, it gets done in less time of the day and I can move on with the rest of the job. And if you're not outsourcing, it could be just a simple case of working out a bunch of formulas. Like I said, you've got templates, you've got formulas, or you've just even got a workflow where you realize things are quicker if I get this part done first and then move on to here. Because some people start at the end, come over here, do something, and then realize they have to change this one piece at the start, which changes everything, depending on what it is they do. So work out the best order, work out formulas, templating, anything you can do to work quicker, but keep that package price there so you can make more money as you get more efficient. And the next tip is to make sure you build your own presence. Fiverr and Upwork are great platforms to get a bunch of people to try and sell to, but it's so competitive that I've found that a lot of the time it's harder to get work with those platforms, and you get paid very little in most cases, than if you just build your own presence. Build a website, social media presence, and get out there and network the old-fashioned way, whether it's face-to-face or call or email people and send them your offers. You're much better setting up your own presence, because one thing about those Upwork and Fiverr sites is they push cheap labor as a way of getting business. They say you can get this done on Fiverr for $5, right? It's called Fiverr for a reason. So consider that. Build your own presence. Do not rely on freelancing networks when trying to build a freelancing business. The next tip is always be looking to raise your prices. Not saying you should always raise them, But every 6 months or a year, look at your prices and think, could you get more? In most cases, you're gonna think that you can't, and you probably can. It's a funny thing. We tend to be conservative because we wanna keep getting business. But if you incrementally raise your prices so that it's not like one big hit, you'll find that over time, you'll slowly exchange your customers from the people who are willing to pay more away from the people who are willing to pay less. And the other thing is, people who pay less, I've personally found to be a lot more sort of high maintenance, and the people who want to pay more just want the job done and they trust in your expertise. Another tip is to specialize or niche down. Now, I'm not saying you should stop doing work for anything outside of that niche, but one thing I did is, because I actually have been teaching martial arts for almost 20 years, is I actually hit my martial arts network hard when I started my freelancing business. So if you actually set up a separate entity, I created a website and a Facebook page called Martial Arts Designer, and it sits alongside my main web design business. And to this day, I get people from all over the world asking me for work on Martial Arts Designer. And all I've done is built a website, sat it there, and I actually have been pretty lazy with the Facebook page, but the work keeps coming in because I'm niched down and there's not a lot of people out there advertising web design and graphic design for martial artists. So you don't have to niche down and do just that one thing, or you can if you want to, but you can be a general service and then also push a separate entity as a specialized or niche down service to cut through the noise and reach more people that way. Also, be an expert, not a craftsman. So when you're someone doing something, a job, and it could be design, it could be photography, it could be writing, you can sell yourself as the worker who does the job, and that's great because you will get work. But make sure you push yourself as the expert, the person who knows what works, because that gives you leverage to, for one, charge higher. It also puts you in a position where people realize, okay, you can do the job, but you actually know what's best, not just someone who can physically use the tools. So being an expert allows you to then increase your prices and your proposition, your positioning to get better work. But on top of that, if you start to hire and get people on board or start to outsource, you then can let them know your formula and the things you want to do, because you will become an expert as you start to explain processes and approaches to your customers. Another tip in regard to being an expert is to be results focused. So when you're selling to people, they don't want to just receive the product. They're going after it for a result. So when it came to websites, it was a case of, I want to be found online and make more money from the people who find me. So you need to think, what's the result that the person is after with the thing they're trying to get from me? Push that result and become an expert around that. Learn how that works and make sure you use that knowledge in when you're selling. You can say, give them a little bit of information and tell them that the way this works is, Google will find your website, and then we make sure to let them know that if you want to take the next step, here's where you go to contact us. So you start to find ways to bridge the gap between what it is that's out there and the result that what it is you're selling is supposed to achieve, and talk about the steps in between, and make sure you let people know that you understand this isn't just about buying something, it's about achieving a result. Now, this tip is for your sanity, and that is to set a schedule. Work hours. One of the things when I started, I lost track of what was work and what was personal because I just didn't set a schedule. I just thought I'd work when I felt like it. The problem is I either never felt like it and got nothing done, or I was always thinking about work and about my emails and never really getting a chance to relax. Setting work hours, finding a space, shutting the door, setting boundaries around your work will help you to switch on and off mentally, and you'll be properly focused when you work, but you'll also relax when you're not working and get that recuperation you need to make sure you perform properly when you do finally get back to work. The next tip is have a contract. People are going to try and do things and they're going to be dodgy, and they're going to try and not pay you. They're going to try and just take you for what you're worth. And I don't mean everyone, there's just the few that sort of ruin it for everyone else. If you get a chance, speak to a solicitor or a lawyer and get a contract drawn up that you can use with your customers to protect yourself, to make sure you're not getting left doing a ton of work or putting out a ton of money for no return, so you're not losing money or losing time. The next tip is to learn how to communicate clearly. If people don't understand what you're saying or you're using too much jargon, you're going to scare people off. But if you can find ways to take a complex matter and simplify it into layman's terms so people understand what it is you're saying, and learning about communication techniques and ways to just sort of make sure you're understanding what it is they're saying as well, not just communicating yourself, you're going to get way better results in your sales and also with your job. One of the biggest things I've learned about graphic design and web design in my time is not the tools, It's talking to the person and asking the right questions to understand what's in their head, what they're actually looking for, and then being able to tell them what's good and what's bad about that and bring them to a point where we're both going somewhere where my expert status helps me to achieve them better results. A few quick tips as well is make sure you get everything written down. If you're talking verbally, write it down, confirm it in an email so that way everything's in writing, and if anything happens, you've got all the communication there in text, confirm everything, and that way you can also protect yourself if anything goes wrong. Another form of protection is to make sure you always get a deposit. If you have a big job, get a deposit so you got some money in the bank while you're working on things. And this also means that people are serious. If they don't pay a deposit and you get started, they may end up losing interest and going somewhere else because they just haven't taken you seriously. Always get a deposit, protect yourself, and get yourself paid before you get stuck doing work you might not get paid for. Another tip to back all those things up is to define your boundaries and hold them firm. You need to make sure you know where the line is. So setting payment terms, setting your due dates on your invoices, setting certain things in place that as you work, you discover there are certain things that you need to do. Find where those boundaries are, set them, and make sure you hold them. Because if you just go by what you like and don't like and go by feel, chances are you're gonna end up in situations you don't like. So identify what it is you wanna do, identify what you don't wanna do, and the terms of those things, and hold firm on those boundaries. Another tip is to use a tool such as Trello or something similar to actually manage your workflow. If you just write things down on bits of paper or something like that, you're gonna get lost. But even if all you did was have a whiteboard with columns and post-it notes, it's better than nothing. Trello acts like that, where you can have columns and job tickets and things like that. There's a few others out there. I think SANE is another one. You can actually manage your workflow better and keep an eye on things and use it from your computer to your phone to make sure you're tracking all your work and getting it done properly. I do have some videos on Trello I'll link to below, which might be helpful for that too. The next tip is to budget. Know how much you need to live each week and make sure you can make more than that. Set a budget for what you need to pay yourself. Also set a budget for what your business needs to operate, and make sure that you are in a position where you're able to make a lot more than that, because you don't want to be just cutting it fine. There's nothing worse than being week to week in your own business, because all you need is one bad week to run out of money. Set a budget for personal, set a budget for business. Make sure you make more than those things, and if not, adjust and just keep moving from there. You're going to get busy, so the next tip is to outsource when you're busy. Spend some time finding people to outsource. Now, you might not be able to outsource your entire job to people. If you can't do that, try outsourcing pieces of that job. I've outsourced cutting out images in the past, because sometimes I get 100 images I need to cut out and I just don't have the time. But the thing about outsourcing is I make sure I charge my time for those things, because if the person botches the job, I might have to do that anyway. So you never want to find yourself cutting short, but if you can break your jobs into little chunks and find areas to outsource, that's a great way to sort of get ahead quicker when you're freelancing. Don't be too cheap. I've got to tell you right now, if you come in trying to be cheap, you can do this in the start to get started, but your customer base, in most instances, when you're cheap, you reach people who, for whatever reason, just seem to be more difficult to deal with. I've spoken to other freelancers about this. I don't know why it is, but being cheap is a nightmare. And of course, you work so hard and you just make less money. So just think about this. If you have a product that you sell for $20 and your competitor's selling the same product for $100, you're working 5 times as hard with 5 times, spending 5 times the amount of time to get the same work done and get the same amount of money. So, you don't have to reach more people, you just have to make enough money. So don't be cheap. Make sure you price yourself properly and get a good amount of money for your work. Next tip on top of that is don't haggle. Set your price, set your boundary, be firm, don't haggle. When you start haggling, all of a sudden the lines start to blur and things get messy. I refuse to haggle. I've had guys in the past say, I don't want to pay a deposit, but we want to see some work first. And I've just straight up turned them down and said, no, sorry. And I wasn't interested. Even if they decided to pay the deposit from there, I wasn't too sure, because there was a bit of a red flag. But don't haggle. If people want to do something cheaper, go, nah, the price is the price. That's it. Self-respect will keep you going in as a freelancer. So don't haggle. Just please don't haggle. And the next tip on top of that is don't be afraid to turn down work. If you start to get busy, sometimes you're going to get people who you don't want to deal with. Find ways to politely turn them down. You don't have to say you're not interested. Ways you can do that is just to simply find services that you don't want to get anymore and just shoot the price up. If you get those jobs, you're going to get really good money for them, But otherwise, you're going to scare people away from those services and you won't have to do them. But sometimes you just meet people who aren't a good fit and you can say, hey, look, I don't think we're going to be suitable to work together. You might be better off seeing someone else or even having a contact to refer them to. It's not that you want to try and turn away work, but there are times when you just know that it's not going to work out with a certain person or with a certain service. So don't be afraid to turn down work for whatever reason. There's nothing wrong with it. And believe me, it'll keep you more sane and it will actually improve your business because you're doing work you want to do, getting paid better for it, and it just works out way better. Now, the final tip is a personal one. Learn to honestly process feedback. So you're gonna run into people or customers and they're gonna give you feedback and you might not like it all the time. Sometimes you're gonna have people who will just say all this great stuff and give you a glowing report and that'll feel great. But when someone says, look, I didn't like this part or that, or the way you handled it was a bit, you were a bit short, then you need to start going, okay, it's not about working on everything everyone says about you, but it's about going, okay, thinking about it and identifying, is he right? Is this person right about what they said? Is my work right or wrong? And you need to compare it to other experiences because you need to make sure you're keeping your customers happy while also looking after yourself. So be honest with yourself. Learn to sort of let go of the ego a little bit, honestly process feedback and do your best to understand yourself better and the things people are saying, and relate it back to what it is you're really trying to achieve. Because if you just get pig-headed and say, well, no, that person's wrong, you'll never improve and your business will just slow down and eventually you'll go nowhere. So those are my freelancing tips for the day. There's a lot of them. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you did, please consider subscribing. Otherwise, hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.